The keys I'm using are in the bottom right corner of the viewport. I'll begin by adding a bevel modifier to the default cube and shade it smooth. I'll duplicate this collection 4 times, renaming and hiding them. I duplicate the top face and make it slightly wider than the cube. I also extrude this face, which will become the grass area of the tile. I then subdivide the grass tile. I separate the grass section from the rest of the object. In object mode, I add a displace modifier to the grass object. Using a cloud texture. I then select the dirt object and add a displace modifier. In edit mode, I make any adjustments to the grass area as needed. I duplicate the top face and make it slightly wider than the cube. I also extrude this face, which will become the top dirt area of the tile. I then subdivide the dirt tile. I separate this top dirt section from the rest of the object. In object mode, I add a displace modifier to the dirt top object. I then select the bottom dirt object and add a displace modifier. I duplicate the top face and make it slightly wider than the cube. I also extrude this face, which will become the top stone area of the tile. I then subdivide the stone tile. I separate the top stone section from the rest of the object. In object mode, I add a displace modifier to the stone top object. I then select the bottom stone object and add a displace modifier. The wooden bridge I'll make is a simple rope bridge. I'll use the default cube as a guide for the scale of the bridge. I move the cube to the left by 1 unit, and then add a duplicate cube on the right side. I duplicate a cube and scale it to the proper size for a post. scaling the top faces wider. I make 3 duplicates of the shorter posts. I duplicate a cube, scale it to the size of a plank, and separate the plank from the rest of the object. I can now delete the 2 cubes I was using as a guide. In object mode, I add a path and tab into edit mode. This will be the rope for the bridge deck. I scale it to size and center it in between the posts. Using proportional editing, I add a bend to the center of the rope. I duplicate the rope and place it between the other 2 posts. Under the Object Data Properties tab, in the Geometry panel, I add some bevel depth to the ropes. In object mode, I add a curve modifier to the plank and move the plank onto the rope. I add an array modifier to the top of the modifier stack and add more planks. I select the rope and convert it to a mesh. I split the viewport and open the shader editor and UV editor. I drag and drop the palette I downloaded from Infenzia into the shader editor. The link is in the description. In the UV editor, I open the palette. I change to the shading view so I can see my materials. I select the top of the grass tile, and in edit mode, I go into front view and unwrap the grass area using project from view. In the UV editor, I scale the island down and move it to a green material. I then scale the island along the y-axis to fill in the gradient, making sure not to bleed over into any other materials. I repeat this process for the bottom part of the tile. I then select both parts of the tile and join them. I then repeat this process for each tile. I make sure all the tiles are in the center of the world space. Apply all the transforms, and set the origin to the 3D cursor. When I export the tiles as an FBX, I make sure to change the Apply Scalings to FBX Unit Scale and uncheck Bake Animation. In my Unity project, I make a folder for my files. I drag and drop my FBX files and the palette into the folder. I then drag each of the models into the hierarchy. They are now all in the center of the scene, so I'll need to separate them. I can now build out a level. Once I have my level made, I can now make an isometric camera. I create an empty in the hierarchy and rename it Camera Pivot. In the inspector, I make sure I set the position to 0 for each axis. I make the camera a child of the empty and also zero out the position. For the z-axis, I'll change the number to -10. I also change the projection to orthographic. For the camera pivot, I change the X rotation to 30 and the Y rotation to 45. Now when I click on play, I can see my level in an isometric view. If you have a request for a tutorial, a question, or a comment, feel free to leave a comment below the video. If you're interested in learning more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.